Hi everyone, welcome to Bytes of Tech. And today, the tech we are going to bite into is installing MySQL on CentOS 7, a Linux distribution. So let's jump right into it. So I have my shell prompt here. I'm actually connected to one of my servers via SSH. The first thing that we want to do is actually do an update just to make sure everything is up to date before we do the install. And I need to make sure I have elevated permissions, right? So I need to sudo update and nothing to update. I actually did this prior to the video just because this was a fresh install of a virtual machine. So that's why there's nothing to update at this time. So the one thing I want to call out is all of the commands that I'm going to be showing you will also be available on my website, bytesoftech.com, where you can go through and have, we'll just say, text version of this how-to. I'll let you copy and paste the commands. It makes it pretty easy and convenient. So first thing we need to do is actually install MySQL Server. Now with CentOS 7, the one thing to note is by default, the package manager will install MariaDB, which is a fork of MySQL. So where they took the open source code at some point and did a fork and made their own version of it, right? And that's the default that CentOS uses is the MariaDB. So essentially what we need to do is we need to add the MySQL repository to the system. That way when we go to install it, it will install MySQL instead of MariaDB. So we're going to run this command right here to download the repository and install it. Let's go and do that. Download it, and it should prompt me for my password. Nope, it didn't, because remember, I've already done this, right? I already elevated my permissions. So we have that in there. Now the next thing we're going to do is actually install MySQL Server and also all the dependencies. So we'll say yes, and then it should also ask me to import the GPT key because it's my first time using this repository, right? So I'll say yes, yes, and it'll go through and install all 35 packages that I need. All right, that is done. Now that we have it installed, we are going to start the SQL Server. So we'll run this command, and the one thing that you'll notice is when I run the command, there's no like, hey, it started, or there's no status, or there's no acknowledgement of what happened. So what we actually need to do is run this next command that will show us the status of the SQL Server. And you'll see that it's active, meaning it's installed and it's running. It's actually running on the system. So that all looks good. Okay. The next thing that we need to do is actually go through and run the configuration because at this point where we have our MySQL Server installed and it's actually not secure, right? By default, the install generates a temporary password. So we need to get that temporary password. That way we can run the configuration utilizing this password. So we'll go ahead and run that. And this essentially just looks at the log for the MySQL install where the password's logged. And you'll see that the password generated is this. So I'm just going to copy it and run the next command, which is your MySQL secure installation. This will go through and let you, install or set your root password. Install the test database or whatever you want to call it. So we'll go ahead and do that. It's going to ask me to enter the password for root, which is what I just copied. And since it's a temporary password, it's obviously expired and we need to set our own. So I'm going to do that right now. And it doesn't meet complexity requirements. So let me get a little bit more complex with this. All right. Now that that is set, it's updated. It's asking to change it again. And we're going to say no or hit any other key. We're not going to say why because we've already changed it, right? There's no need to. Now it's going to go through and it's going to ask us some configuration prompts. Remove anonymous user. We're going to say yes. We don't want anonymous user. Disallow root login remotely. Essentially what this is saying, hey, for a root user, do you want to not allow them to log in from anywhere besides the local host, the server? And for security reasons, we're going to say yes. Typically how you'd want to do this is have another account with database privileges. And then for each database, you want to have a user that owns that database, maybe users that only have read access and so forth. So we're going to say yes. Remove test database, we'll say yes. We don't remove test database. Reload privileges, we're going to say yes to reload everything, and all done. So we've set our password, root password. We remove the anonymous users and the test database. So what we should do is, I guess, just make sure everything works. So we're going to use the MySQL admin tool, logging in as root, and we're just going to check what version is installed. Run that, enter the password I set. And this is the MySQL server that we are running, the version. Perfect. So this is, not too complex. I also have a video on installing MySQL on Windows systems, which is fairly easy as well. I'll be putting out some videos on some basic SQL stuff, creating databases, schemas, writing some queries, updating records, inserting records, all that type of good stuff, as well as, some security stuff, creating users, some best practices for permissions and things like that. So be on the lookout for that.